What's up? What's up? What's up? It's Luke Sanders with the Fair Enough podcast. I'm here with the boys again, Micah and Hayden. How you guys doing today?
Oh,
What's
doing
up,
good.
boys?
A little warm, but doing good.
Well, tell your parents to turn your AC on, okay? I'll shoot them a text. All right, today we are going to do a rookie draft breakdown. So this is our league. It's called Squad. It's a 12-team Superflex. What we're going to do is we're going to go over the first round pick by pick. Then we're going to go over each of our own picks that we did. I'll have to go fast because I had quite a few in this draft. And then we'll have a new little game at the end. We'll go over some reaches, some steals, things like that. So we'll get it started. We have the same first pick in this draft that pretty much everyone does, I think. Caleb Williams going first in the super flex. I think that's probably about what everyone would do. Either of you guys have different thoughts on who you would take first in the super flex?
Um, Obviously
No,
Williams, unless you're just locked at quarterback. I mean, unless you have
yeah,
three young studs already.
Yeah. We have one of our boys trade up to the first pick.
Harrison,
So
but you
Cam is
also
in a
might
rebuild,
consider
full
trading
rebuild,
him.
gave up quite a bit to get up there. Yeah. Traded a bunch to get up there, and that's kind of what Grant's thought process was. He's got two good quarterbacks, so he wanted to deal that pick. I took Marvin Harrison at 2. That was pretty easy for me as well. Just going to kind of go over these first three because I think they're standard too. Jaden Daniels went 3. I think that's the first 3 for pretty much every single rookie draft that I've been a part of. The order on Jaden Daniels and Marvin Harrison is flipped in a couple, but depending on need. But I think at 4 is when we first get a little controversial here, and this was actually my pick that we'll talk about a little more later. But I took Drake May. I think a lot of people will go Adunze or Neighbors. What do you guys think about that one?
I didn't mind it because you kind of need a quarterback. I mean, you'll probably have two that you'll start before him, but I mean, with Rodgers' injury, I think there's a chance that you might end up playing Drake more than him. Um, but no, I thought that was a pretty good spot for him. I just don't love that he went to the Patriots. I don't think he'll put up great numbers.
I tend to agree with that as far as the Patriots go. The next one I think was interesting too. Adunze going next. I would have taken Neighbors, but they went Adunze because of the stack. I think that makes sense too. Then Micah, you took Neighbors. You want to talk about that one a little bit?
Yeah, I went neighbors. My roster's kind of already set, so I kind of just went best available player, and I definitely thought he was probably the best one there. I think he's going to struggle a little bit with quarterback play. Hopefully, Daniel Jones will have a comeback year. But if Daniel Jones struggles, it may be a year or two before you see production out of him. But I still think with my roster, I could bear to see him wait a couple of years before he really pops.
Yeah, I see what you're saying with Daniel Jones. I agree, but I think Neighbors was easily the best player left on the board. Pretty no brainer there. Brock Bowers went next. I think the only way that somebody can really dislike that pick is if you don't value tight ends, which some people do. Then Brian Thomas. This one was interesting to me. I would have taken Worthy before him, probably as far as receivers go, and then definitely McCarthy there, depending on roster build, especially only having 2 starting quarterbacks. I think McCarthy might have been the move there, but not 100% sure. Any thoughts on Brian Thomas for you guys?
Yeah, I think he's just going into a stacked offense. I mean, I know they got rid of um, their top guy this past offseason, but I just don't know if he's going to get a lot of target share there. And he's pretty slim, so we'll just see how he holds up in his first year.
Yeah, I think it's hard not to take McCartney up there. I think he should have went a little sooner. Um, or Worthy is just hard with that power of an offense. It's hard not to take a guy like that up there as well.
Yeah, I mean, Brian Thomas from a rookie profile perspective, I wasn't a huge fan of, but I do get the draft capital there. He was higher significantly than Worthy and Mitchell. So if you want to shoot your shot, go for it. I don't think that's a bad pick by any means. Then AD Mitchell here. This was one that kind of confused me because I definitely think with this roster that you should have went McCarthy here, but then also still have Worthy ranked ahead of him. So that one was definitely interesting as well.
Yeah, I agree. He's only got One real stud at QB. I don't know if wide receiver was the right move there, but I think if Mitchell keeps a good head, I think he could have a good rookie year.
Yeah, and with Grant being a Broncos fan and knowing you've got a pick a little bit later that you can reach up and grab Bo Nix a little bit. I don't hate it, but I still think JJ is the better of the two quarterbacks. And for fantasy, you might as well go get the better of the two quarterbacks.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So then we have Worthy here. Definitely who I would have taken a couple picks earlier. I think that's a good pick, especially for a rebuilding roster, because I don't know how well he does this year first in particular, with Hollywood Brown maybe being the one there and Rice maybe being the one as well. But I think in the next couple of years, that pick definitely pays off.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. It's hard to pass up that kind of speed with Patrick Mahomes throwing you the ball.
Yeah, and it also depends how early he pays off on when Rice's suspension comes. I mean, if it
Yeah.
comes this year, he may pay off this year, and if it comes next year, I think he's definitely paying off next year. Um,
Hmm.
Yeah, 100%. And especially if it's next year, because who knows if Hollywood Brown comes back, if he wants a big
yeah,
contract, Worthy might be the only receiver in that offense that's still there for the first 6 games. So could be interesting for sure. McCarthy here went at 11. Hayden, we'll let you talk a little bit about the trade because you originally had this 11th pick.
Yeah. So I was actually gonna possibly trade with you, but I think you would let Jay have a little bit of like I guess know how that you were gonna trade. So then he sent me some trades, but um, I we ended up doing. He gave me Jackson Smith and Nigba, and then a late second rounder, early third rounder for that pick. So I feel like I got a lot of what I needed, which was more players, and I wasn't necessarily in love with JJ. Plus, I had enough QB help. I think I'll be all right without picking him. So, but I think Jay got who he wanted, so I think it worked out.
Yeah, for sure. And I also think that, we'll talk more about the actual quarterback pick of McCarthy and May in a little bit when it comes to our game later. But I liked the pick for Jay for sure, and he's a snake. I should never have told him that I was going to trade with you.
Yep.
Um, I'll have to talk to him about that sometime. But last pick of the first round, Lab McConkey here. I think it's a solid pick. Maybe a little earlier than I would like to see it, but it definitely could pay off in that offense with him being the one and no one else really around him except for maybe Quentin Johnson.
Yeah, I like it. I like the pick just because, like you said, there's no depth there. You're going to have Herbert throwing the ball, and I don't think he has a whole lot of wide receiver superstar depth. I mean, he's got some guys that are pretty good, but um, I think Ladd McConkey could help him out a lot in depth.
yeah, being short there at wide receiver, and even your number one right. Nope, that's not who I thought it was. I thought he had Mike Evans, but that's Ryan or Zach Evans. Uh, but yeah,
He's
just being.
he's pretty loaded at receiver. Let me scroll down here. I can help you out.
I
But
He's
didn't
got
get that far. Yeah, he's got.
AJ
he's got
Brown.
Jefferson.
Uh, yeah, so he could definitely, especially if Vlad needs to take a year going, he's not going to be bad off there.
No, and the only thing that I maybe would have done differently is looking at his running backs. I might have done something there. Um, but I can definitely see if you're in the best player available market. I think Lad McConkey's right there, so I totally understand the pick.
And
So that's what happened in the first.
maybe if he hits, he could use him as a trade for running back because there wasn't a lot of running backs available that were real great.
No, I mean, there's definitely two that were above everybody else in the draft, but I can see the arguments for avoiding those guys at this point on both of them. So that's probably not a bad plan, honestly, if he wants to take that, use it for depth, and figure it out later. So that's what happened in the first round of this draft. Honestly, kind of went pretty quick because a lot of it was pretty much what you'd expect. You can have some discussion about those quarterbacks, which we'll get into later. But first, we're going to talk about some steals that we saw in this draft. So Hayden, why don't you hit it with the first steal of the draft?
I'm gonna give Micah some love. Even though I hate to do it, he picked Malik Neighbors with the sixth pick, and I think that was a pretty good steal, just because they don't have hardly anybody in that wide receiver room, and I think um, coming from a college that really produces a lot of great wide receivers here in the recent years, with Jamar Chase and guys like that, Justin Jefferson, I think he could pop off. The only thing that scares me is who's going to be throwing him the ball. I think he'll get a lot of targets either way, but Daniel Jones and then whoever their backup is, I don't even know at this point if it's still Tyrod Taylor or if it's somebody else. But either way, I mean, it's just going to be what kind of quality of targets are those?
I think it's Drew Lock, isn't it?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
Drew
it's
Lock's the
locked now.
backup.
Yep.
All right, Mike, I'm going to put you on the spot here real quick. If Cam would have went Malik Neighbors at 1-5, would you have went J.J. McCarthy or Roma Dunze at 1-6?
Ooh, ooh. That's a hard one. Probably a Doomsday, but that's just because I'm so set. I'm pretty set at quarterback already. Already got Kyler Murray, Anthony Richardson, and I've got Daniel Jones. So I've got three viable quarterbacks. I probably would have went another wide receiver, but I would have been tempted to go JJ.
Yeah, I just now saw, it gets kind of small in the print from our screens. I just saw Richardson, so I didn't. It was a little closer for me than that because I thought you had just Jones and Murray. So I would have definitely went Dunze 2. You had to be doing backflips when Neighbors fell to you at 6 right there.
Yeah.
Draft kind of played out perfect for you at that point.
Yeah.
So next steal, Micah, you got someone on. You got someone on there.
Yeah, if you haven't noticed, I keep cutting out and losing you guys for about 2 or 3 seconds on the podcast. So if you haven't noticed, I've been kind of spacing a little bit. But I have Blake Corum. I just think with a kind of low depth running back draft and a running back who has a pretty high chance of playing a good amount this year
Oh,
as a passing down back
Yeah,
and
he's definitely
taking
cutting
some.
in and out.
I'm cutting in and out.
Yeah, you're cutting out in and out pretty bad. Yeah, I do like Corum as well, especially with the way the Rams use running backs, and if he can either beat out Kyron or take some of like a timeshare going in there, I think that he could be a steal at that spot as well.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so my steal here is Jatavian Sanders. So I think in most drafts he's going in the second round. Here he fell to 3-8. You have a team that really needs people to throw the ball to in the Panthers, and they took Leggett in the first round, but outside of that, they don't have a lot of threats as far as like playmakers. So I really like Jatavian Sanders if he can develop into something in that offense.
Yeah, I think that could be a steal. I mean, you're always looking for that next Travis Kelce or Rob Gronkowski at the tight end position, since there's not very many that score real well. You can find a diamond in the rough somewhere in that at that position. It really helps out.
Yeah. So we'll move on to who we thought were reaches. Micah being on tilt over there has got me a little flustered, but
Yeah,
we're here. We're still here.
it's been rough. Like you guys have cut out about 15 times, and that's why I've
Like
been
his IT
speaking.
work over there. This
Podcast
is
is going
why
to be
he
so
works on
interesting.
the. This is why he works on the railroad, ladies and gentlemen, because he's not exactly an IT guy.
Well, I have fiber optic internet, and it's never been good lately. I don't know what it is.
Who says it like fiber optic? Jeez.
Yeah. Okay. Dialing back in. Dialing back in. So right here we're going to go with the reaches next. I'll go ahead and go first. I got Troy Franklin, who, when I look at it from a whole perspective, for Grant here, I get it. I understand that he knew he was going to take Franklin and Bo Nix and take them together. And, they have the chemistry from college, play for the same school. I just see a lot of Quentin Johnston in his game. Really only runs deep routes, has a lot of drops in college. Just not a guy that I was into. really big in the fantasy community of people that really loved him. I just don't see it. I don't see good routes. I don't see good hands. And when you compare those two things, when you put those two things together, that's a pretty bad combination there. So that would be my reach in this draft.
All right, my reach is going to be AD Mitchell. Sorry, Grant. Grant's getting a little hate in this right now.
I didn't
Uh,
realize he did that.
yeah, that's just in my opinion way too early for a guy who's going to be probably the fourth fourth wide receiver in that wide receiver room, most likely. I could see him squeezing into a third every once in a while, but it's just for a first round for a guy
Yeah,
who
so I think he was going to say
probably
that he
won't
can.
get much playing time this year. It's kind of scary for me to take that leap.
Yeah. Well, we lost about 3 seconds of that audio, but I think he could be the third guy in the offense behind Pittman and Downs, maybe even second if he really reaches his ceiling, but definitely not a guy you want to take at 1-9 that might be the second best receiver in their room, even at his best.
Yeah, I agree. Well, my reach was Brock Bowers. I don't know. I thought that, especially for Doobie, I thought he could have picked somebody different there. I didn't think he really needed to go tight end wise because he's got some fairly good pieces there already with Njoku. He's already got the other tight end that I think will be still be used a decent amount for Vegas and Myers. And I just don't know how it's going to work out there since they don't really have a great quarterback. Gardner Minshew is their best one, and if he gets hurt, it's Aiden O'Connell. Um, and they're a defensive-minded head coach. I don't think offensively it's going to be a great output for a 1-7 pick there.
Yeah, I think part of his thought process was having Mayer. He knows he gets one tight end one for sure. But I agree with you. And tight end possession is just hit or miss. So if Brock Bowers isn't the tight end 2 or 3 pretty consistently, the point differential between him getting a top 20 wide receiver every year versus a top 6 tight end, the numbers just say to take the receiver pretty much every time. So if
Yeah.
Bowers ends up to be a tight end 1 or 2 every year, then he made a great choice. But if Brock's like a tight end 6 to 8 every year, might be something that he looks back on and wishes he went a different route. All right, so we're going to move into our new game. And I did actually get a little more creative on the name this time. It's going to be called the Porridge Test. So it's based off of Goldilocks and the Three Bears for everyone that's familiar. It's going to be whether they were drafted too early, too late, or just right. So we got the 4 quarterbacks that we're going to talk about here. Obviously, the first 2 we talked about always go 1, 2, 3. So we're going to start at Drake May. We're going to do Drake May, JJ McCarthy, Bo Nix, and Michael Penix. So the first one obviously is Drake May at 1-4. That was my pick. Um, I'll go ahead and start us off because that is the easiest way to do it. Um, I was just right. So obviously it's my pick. I'm a little biased, but with the way my roster was constructed, like Hayden talked about earlier, I have Rodgers, who's probably got a year left, who's going to play most of the time. And then I have Jordan Love. So I had 2 guys I could really rely on right now, but I needed a third guy with Fields maybe being a starter, maybe not. And that was my thought process going into Drake May.
Yeah, I like the Drake May, but I think he's a little too early. Um, but a lot of this dynasty is kind of what you need, though. So I understand the pick, but I think he should have fallen to about 6. I think a Doomsday and Neighbors probably should have went ahead of him. But I mean, a lot of times you just got to draft on your needs.
Yeah, and I'm going to agree with Luke. I'm going to go with just right, just because for Luke's situation, I think a quarterback was needed. And I'd say Drake May probably had the most talent there still available at quarterback. I just don't like the team that he's on at all. I don't like his future in that aspect. But like Luke said, he's still got a year where he may not even have to play Drake May hardly at all unless he's, you know, really playing better than people think he might. Um, but I just don't know if he'll develop in that offense, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's definitely. I wish he would have. If he would have went anywhere but the Patriots, I think that's a lock just right with his talent. But that landing spot is scary. I do think that having the receivers go to landing spots that I don't like as much either for them. That was also helpful in me making the Drake May decision. I mean, if Neighbors would have went to the Chargers instead of the Giants, I would have probably went Neighbors. But that's my thought process on that one. The next QB we got on the list that went at 111 is JJ McCarthy. Um, so, Michael, why don't you take us away?
All right. I cut back in just in time for that. I missed about 30 seconds before then. So, yeah, we'll go with JJ. I had I had him too late. I think he should have went up there about where Brian Thomas went. I just think in a super flex, quarterbacks are really important, and with his running aspect, even if he's not a great football quarterback, I think he'll be a pretty solid fantasy football.
Yeah, on JJ, I went a little too early just because I thought with Jay, since Jay was really, that was back to when he traded with me for that pick because he really wanted JJ. I thought it was just a little early because he already has two that will play before him, and Watson and Herbert. I do understand it, and the fact that he went to Minnesota with a lot of offensive weapons, great coach. He's thinking, he could turn into something really good there. And then also, Watson and Herbert have kind of gotten banged up in the last year. And then you never know with Watson and how, he's doing with that team. He always seems to be aggravating somebody over there or just not playing for some weird reason. So I didn't mind it, but I did think it was a little early. I think he could have picked somebody of better value there and waited a little bit, maybe even traded down.
Yeah, I really was hard on this one because when it was the draft, I thought it was way too late. I was trying to trade in that 111 spot, but the more you look at the season and how I think it's going to go, I think I'm going to say just right for like that 111 spot. I agree with Micah wholeheartedly on QBs are super valuable, and maybe it was a little too late. But then I think about it from the perspective of I don't think he's going to play all year. I think Sam Darnold plays this year, so how giving up that year and getting those two receivers that are ahead of him, I think it's just right because Jay traded up. Those other two guys get a player that's going to probably perform better this year. Maybe in this draft, I can make the argument it was too late because both of those are rebuilding teams ahead of them at 1-9 and 110. But in a normal draft, those are going to be competitive teams that 1-9 and 110 are just one piece away. So I'm going to go with just right on JJ McCarthy. The next guy that came off the board was Bo Nix, and I'll go first. I think that's too late. And kind of the same thing that I was just talking about with JJ McCarthy. Bo Nix is going to start this year, and he's going to start quickly. I think I would be surprised if he doesn't start the year because JJ is sitting behind Sam Darnold, who I think showed a little bit last year, under Shanahan and Gruesome, whereas Bo Nix is fighting against Zach Wilson and Jarrett Stidham. Um, I don't think it's like way too late, but I think that, if you have a quarterback that's going to start right away, they probably should be the first round of a super flex draft.
Yeah, I went too early. I just Denver last year didn't look great. And a lot of people hated on Russell, but he was still a top 20 quarterback in fantasy leagues. And their offense still didn't look good. Um, I just worry about yes he'll play, but I don't think he's worth having in a starting spot. And I just don't know about his overall career. I just think of, and I don't think he's too early by much. Maybe just two or three picks, probably in my opinion. There.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with he's just right. He's the last QB that taken that I think will play this year. Really, I mean Michael Penix maybe barring an injury to Kirk, but I think Bo will play quite a bit in that offense for Sean Payton, and honestly, I could see him doing well. I mean, I could see him doing well enough that he might want to put him in a flex maybe or something, or maybe even if somebody gets hurt. I mean, he's got good QBs in Burrow and Stroud, but Burrow has had some season-ending injuries. So I mean, I don't mind it where he took him. It's a little bit of backup, some depth there at QB, and then maybe he pans out in that Sean Payton offense. He made Drew Brees really good, so maybe he can make Bo Nix really good too.
Yeah, the thing about Bo Nix too is like he has to throw touchdowns because he's not going to run. So you can make the argument too, like maybe he's not a first round quarterback because he's only going to be a pocket passer the rest of his career. Speaking of only pocket passers, next on our list is Michael Penix. We have him at 2-6 right here in this draft. Hayden, why don't you go ahead and tell us your thoughts?
Yeah, I thought he was too early. That's just because I don't think he's going to play this year. And if Kirk's healthy and plays well this year, I don't think he's playing next year. I just think there's probably somewhere else that you might have been able to get somebody that could have helped out this year as far as running backs or wide receivers go, maybe even a tight end at that position. Um, but I didn't mind it, Micah. I mean, I think he'll have some upside at some point. It's just when will that happen? And I get it as far as your QB situation. I mean, I know you've got two pretty good guys, but other than that, I kind of understand it for some good depth and somebody who's going to be maybe playing and starting a couple years down the road.
Yeah, I have him at just right. I think he's got to go mid to early second round because there can't be that many teams that can't wait or can. Oh, what's the word I'm looking for? There's got to be a team somewhere in there that can wait a couple years on a quarterback, and I just happen to be that team. And I mean, like, yeah, I could have went with probably Corum or somebody like that I think went a little too low. But when you look at my roster, I mean, I've got Najee Harris and Zach Moss as my fourth and fifth running backs. I've got uh, where is he? I've got Malik Neighbors is probably my fourth or fifth wide receiver. Um, I just had so much depth everywhere that I just thought I might as well take a chance on a quarterback that I think might sit 2 years. But I also love quarterbacks that sit a couple years, especially when I have the quarterbacks to wait a couple years on somebody. And so I think he's going to be sitting and learning under a good quarterback. And I think just he's in a great spot to be a future quarterback. And maybe he won't play for a couple years, but I was okay with that.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I totally understand the mindset, and I'm with Hayden on this one. And it's more of like an investment thing for me. Like if you invest your money in a CD, like yeah, it's a good investment because you know you're not going to lose anything. You're always going to have that value. Like if next year you wanted to trade Michael Penix for 2-6, you could probably do that. You wouldn't lose a single thing. But my thought process is I want to win this year. And yeah, right now, like let's take Blake Corum. He might not be better than Najee Harris next year, but he also could. He also could be a running back that you would be playing right now and winning games, or Xavier Legette, or receiver, somebody like that. So my thought process is in the same vein of you could get 2-6 out of him next year. If I wanted to trade an early second for Penix next year and you're trying to win, I might be able to make that trade right away. So I would have gotten someone that I think improves my roster in the meantime because I could see Kirk Cousins playing for 4 more years. And I don't know what happens to Penix in that scenario of if Cousins is still balling out in 3 years, what do they do? Do they say, oh, well, we got to play this guy because we drafted him? Or do we keep winning games with Kirk Cousins? I think it's a big risk. It obviously could go the other way where you get a huge reward. If something happens to Kirk this year and then all of a sudden you have a starting quarterback who's playing really well. I also have my doubts about Penix in general before the draft. So that probably plays into that a little bit where I just think from a pocket passer perspective only, it's hard to score fantasy points. And I don't see Penix being anything more than that at any point.
Yeah, I would
So
agree with that statement.
that is the Porridge test. We had a pretty short podcast today, only 31 minutes. These drafts are not that hard to go over. Is there anything else that stuck out to you guys before we close this one out? Any reaches, steals that you just have to get off your chest?
We never went over our picks ourselves, but with the way my internet is, that might not be the greatest idea.
Micah, you go first. As long as you're in, we're going to do this. I forgot
Okay.
about that part.
Yeah, I'm cutting out, so
Well, that didn't last very long.
I, I cut it.
Oh, that was great.
Okay, now I'm back. So I went. I only had three picks. I went Neighbors, just because he was the best available player. I was ecstatic to get him at 6. Then I went Penix at 2-6, just for the reasons I explained.
Bye bye.
And
And
then
he's
I
out
had
again. We're going to fill him
4-6,
in.
and I went with
Um,
uh, Theo Johnson because I knew I had some insight on Darren Waller probably not playing this year and retiring, and I just thought I'd take a chance there in that 4th round to get a solid tight end that might come out and do something here in a year or two.
yeah, you're welcome for the solid insight. Okay. Hayden, why don't you go over your picks too?
Yeah, so I didn't have pick till 211 because I traded back so many times. Um, but I took Jalen Polk, wide receiver for New England, and I think that he could end up maybe having a decent year. I mean, there's not a lot of depth there, and he's going to have Drake May throwing him the ball. So, I mean, maybe they can develop a connection. My next one I picked Ray Davis. He's a running back in Kentucky for the Bills, and I just needed to kind of build some running back depth. I don't have a ton of guys that um, take a lot of carries, so I just needed to kind of shop around and find guys that maybe could hit, even if they don't hit this year, maybe they could hit next year because running backs are just so hard to come by. Um, my next pick wasn't until the beginning of the 4th round. I took the running back from Oregon, Bucky Irving. He went to the Buccaneers. They've already got a starter, um, but I do think that maybe he could be somewhat of maybe a pass catching running back or something. Maybe he can help out there. Just trying to find some depth at that position for me. That's kind of where my team is hurting. And then my last pick was the second to last of the draft, and I took the running back from Clemson. Just trying to build depth there, trying to draft guys who looked like they could do something at the next level, and that also went to teams that I think would use them well.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Hayden's pick. I was going to talk about Micah's pick, and then I realized we basically talked about all of them throughout the episode, except for Theo Johnson. But Will Shipley there, great pass catching running back. I love that behind Saquon. Maybe get some PPR points. Bucky Irving, where you got him, I love him. His ADP is actually like really high. It's like the beginning of the 3rd, and I don't love it there. But I think Rashad White's shown some tendencies to not be super efficient. So if they can find somebody there, maybe Bucky Irving can do a little bit of that. And then Ray Davis is an absolute love. And I hate how much I like your picks, and I'm talking really positive about all of them. It's really making me so mad. But the Bucs have shown every year that they want to take carries away from James Cook, especially inside the goal line. I think Ray Davis could actually be productive for fantasy this year. A lot of talent. He's kind of older, but super good. And like I said, at 3-1, I really like it. If you're trying to reach on him, I'm not necessarily a fan, but that's a good pick there. All right. Well, now the podcast isn't going to be short because I have so many picks in this draft, but we kind of already talked a little bit about them. I got Marvin Harrison at 1-2. For me, it's Caleb Williams and it's Marvin Harrison 1-1, 1-2 pretty easily every time. He's just a stud. Everything he does is so good. His routes, his hands, his speed and size for what he has is pretty fantastic. Drake May 1-4. Talked about that already. Just needed a QB at that spot. And then I didn't have a pick till 2-9. So I took Xavier Legette at 2-9. Getting a guy that was drafted in the 1st round at 2-9 was kind of my selling point there. I don't know that I love Legette or the offense, but obviously the team loved him. So for me, that was pretty easy. Probably a little bit of a reach here, but I took Ben Sinnott at 210. I think he's the best tight end in this class outside of Bowers. Good hands. And then the offense he went to, I really like with Kingsbury. They always use their tight ends quite a bit. So enjoyed that one there. Malachi Corley at 3-2. I really like Corley a lot. I think he's a great yak guy, and he's something that the Jets don't really have. That was my biggest selling point. They have Mike Williams, who's a good deep threat. Garrett Wilson runs really good routes, but all he really has to do is beat out Gibson there, and I think he can do that. Jalen Wright out of Tennessee, he was one of my favorite running backs. I don't love the landing spot with HN and Mostert already being there, but I do think, it could look a little like HN last year where he's so explosive. Even if he has minimal touches, he can still score a lot of points there. Tyrone Tracy, if you haven't really heard about him, put him on your radar. He's the running back for the Giants. Right now, Singletary's the starter. He's only played running back for 2 years. He was a receiver before that at Purdue. I think he's going to be the starting running back for the Giants by the end of the year. If not for real life, at least for fantasy because of his pass catching ability. Javon Baker, I think he's the one of the two to have for the Patriots. Sorry, Hayden. At receiver, I think Jalen Polk is a little bit more technically sound as a receiver, but Javon Baker's talent is huge. Good size. I think Drake May, especially with that big arm, is going to love just chucking it up to Javon Baker. And then last pick of the draft, I took Eric All. It was the last pick of the draft. It's 412. I don't really see a huge upside, but I do need to get something at tight end. So I took a second shot there as well. So that is the Squad Dynasty draft. I would like to apologize to Grant because for some reason we just knocked him the whole time. That was not intentional, Grant, I promise.
It was a bad GM.
Other than that, I think it was a pretty good draft top to bottom. I think a lot of people made the right moves for their teams. No really weird things happen in this draft, unlike a couple of our other ones, which maybe we'll get to at some point. But overall, just good job, guys, on everything you did. So that's going to be it for us today. Like I said, still a shorter podcast, a little bit longer than when I said it originally, but it was nice to see you boys tonight. Any sign-offs yet? Do we have it solidified?
Should have turned a light on because I didn't realize how dark it was getting on my screen.
Well, that's fair.
Well, we couldn't hear you the whole time anyways.
Yeah.
They can't see the shine on your head anymore, so that's good.
I still see a little glare right there.
All right. See you later, boys.
See you, boys.
And I cut out.
Adios.